All right, so we're going to get to it because we have a hard stop at 3 o'clock. And my plan today is actually to leave quite a bit of time to talk about Arthur's concern. And so just keep that in mind. So let's do approval of the meeting minutes. I know Tyler sent those around. Did everybody have a chance to read those?
I meant to tell you that too. That has not been circulated.
Oh, I thought you, did you just send them to me? Oh, oops. All right. We will table that for the next meeting. That's okay. I read them. We'll table that to the next meeting. See, look, where
you read them. So did you get it on a different link? Is that it?
No, I helped set the agenda and I think I may have even asked Tyler for them. Anyways.
Okay. All right.
You didn't get them and it just happened. So we'll get those at the next meeting. Our apologies.
Gotcha.
I am going to turn over to Melissa to give an update on premium pay. You're muted.
Old habits die hard. So we are currently working through with department heads on verifying the schedules for employees for the period of time that we are looking to attribute premium pay towards. Jenny, we talked to Sandy Pooler in Arlington and got a lot of lessons from what he did. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is also kind of matching that up against the leave that was taken during that time period as well. So injured, workers' comp, any other kind of leave. And we have estimates currently for the town side based on, the preliminary schedules that we do have. And then, we should be close to finalizing that. I know that Chaz did talk to Linus about the school side, and they've been given a deadline to provide us with their population and who they deem eligible under that programming. So I think that will be coming within the next couple of weeks. Then there's a level of engagement that we need to do with the unions as well. Once that's all kind of set, then that will be ready for the board to take action on it.
Great. And I just want to add that for the general public and for this committee, I think this committee mostly knows, but for the general public, there are some fairly strict criteria about what qualifies for premium pay. So whereas ideally we'd love to give it to everybody, we really have to stick within these guidelines. And our plan is to actually post the guidelines and make it very clear for everyone to understand who qualified and who didn't, obviously without posting any names, but just the guidelines. One of the big guidelines is you have to actually have been working in person. So you have to have a certain percentage of your time where you were physically in the office working in person. So just so you all know, once the premium pay is decided, all of that will be made available on our website. So you can all see how the decisions were made. And that's also why it's taking so long, because determining who is eligible appropriately is a big part of being compliant. Great. Any questions from anybody on the committee? Oh, I love it. We're making progress. Okay, so I am actually going to move the agenda around just a tiny bit because I want to leave as much time as we need for talking about assistance to vulnerable populations, which Arthur was what you had brought up to me as your concern. So what I'd like to do first is actually talk a little bit about the round 2 criteria and the process and the round 2 timeline. And then we'll leave the rest of the meeting to talk about are we targeting the intended populations and how can we do that if we're not? Go ahead, Mike. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Was Tyler first?
Yep, that's all right. I just wanted to make one quick announcement as far as round 1 goes too, because I know that's also going to be a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Is that what you wanted to do, Mike? Yes, please, Tyler. Go ahead. Thank you both.
I wanted to just make the announcement. We're still actually working on the agreements on our end. There were a few other delays that happened that were sort of unexpected. So that's still a work in progress. We're expecting, I would say at this point, probably at some point, maybe like the first week of October. So we'll be in touch with that and be reaching out. So if you haven't heard from me yet, don't take that as anything that there was some issue. We're just delayed and expanded over our capacity.
That's okay. You know what, Tyler, thank you. Mike and I can send out another update email. We can draft something over the weekend. Mike, yes? And just,
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just concerned about organizations that, you know, have built their plans and their budgets around receiving funding. So what, October, first, I suppose October is like 9 days away, so 8 days away. So, okay. It would be great if we can use this, what we've learned about the pain of getting this out to speed things up for the second round. That's for sure.
yeah. And we can talk a little offline too about whether we can potentially send out the ones that are ready. Or if the roadblock is for all of them, if it's still at the MOU level.
It's at the MOU level.
The MOU level. Okay. So I will apologize to everyone on behalf of us, but I will say that we've had some unexpected back end hiccups that we did not anticipate, that there wasn't much we could do about. And we are dealing with those. But I do apologize. We do understand. I mean, I'm a person, my job is literally grant funded. My day job is grant funded. So I do understand those impacts. And as Mike said, we'll do our best to reduce any kind of recurrence in phase 2. Right. Thank you. And actually, I will say this in terms of phase 2, we intend to open up for grants the very first of the new year, the second, whatever the day back in the office is that January 2nd or 3rd? And the grant portal will open up. We're going to be open, did we decide 6 or 8 weeks? For about 6 weeks for you to submit your grant. So you can start planning now for that window for submission. And we will post the timeline on our website. And at our next meeting, we'll share the full timeline, unless we have it. Do we have it? Tyler or Melissa?
Are you talking about the timeline for round 2 specifically?
Yeah, sorry, for round 2.
No, I don't think we have that yet.
We will finalize it, and then at our next meeting, we'll share it and post it. But heads up, it's going to be opening for phase 2 grant applications at the beginning of January, and it'll be approximately 6-week timeline for those. So that we, the committee, have a little bit more time than last year to review grants. Any questions from the committee so far? And I'll remind the public that we will have a public comment period at the end, at which point, if you would like to speak, we'd love to hear from you. So quickly, earlier today, I sent around our score sheet. Tyler is going to be revising the town score sheet, and I'm going to be revising the score sheet that we used. And I think we can all agree it was both helpful and not helpful at the same time. So what I'd like to do is just make it helpful. And I can't do that without input from you guys. So what worked, what can go, what should stay, what was missing? And you can also, if you don't want to talk about it here, you can also put it in an email or and shoot it to me in an email. It was perfect? No, I know it wasn't perfect. Oh, Jenny, yes, please.
It was perfect. No, I love using those words though, but that's not what I was going to say. But it was helpful to have, but I don't think that it served the purpose we wanted it to. I'm not going to talk about the town side. I'll just talk about the organization side, obviously. And I feel like I also provided a lot of feedback at the end of our last meeting.
I have all those notes, and I do have all those notes.
But one thing I was thinking about after you sent it back out again is it seems to be missing the how. Like, instead of does your organization or do you serve, and it's sort of the simple yes, no framework, I feel like it would be helpful to understand how, and a little bit more of like, what's the impact of that work? What's an example? Which I realize could mean some, deeper scoring that might be needed, because it's always easy to just answer yes or no. which some of the things could be yes and no. I just would like to see more about how and more about outcome.
Got it. Thank you.
So those are the two things. Thanks.
And before you leave, were there any that you just felt could just go, were just not useful? And you can email those to me. Any questions are on there that you just were like, we don't need that?
No, I just would reword them. I think it just the framework of this sort of yes, no thing seemed to not get answers
what
we
you wanted.
needed or
Yep.
understand really the organization's capacity, including the financial one. I'm not sure we got that either.
Got it. Thank you. Brian or Arthur?
You want to go, Arthur? Go ahead. Get on mute though.
You're on mute.
I'm off mute now.
Yes.
I'm fine as long as I have Melissa and Tyler, okay, to sort of guide me along. I really leaned on them very heavily the first round, and I was delighted that they could be of assistance. So I'm fine.
Okay. Thank you. Brian?
So yeah, similar to what Jenny said, I think I elaborated a lot more on this at our final meeting last time when it was a lot fresher. I guess I do remember we talked about how Tyler really pulled those together at the last minute out of thin air, and it was an amazing for the time allotted. It was incredible. But yeah, I guess now that we have a little bit more experience, we could do a little better. I did find them helpful in framing the review. It's always helpful, I think, to have that guide and to assess each application by the similar criteria. So that was helpful. I like the second attachment. I don't know where that you sent out today, Miriam. I like the fact that it's clear that, yes equals a certain number and no equals 0. In terms of getting rid of questions, I did feel like some of the questions were a little redundant in that they probably wouldn't have got through the initial screening if the answer was no. For instance, do they have a board of directors? I assume that's a clearing criteria. If you don't have a board of directors, should it even get here? Maybe I'm wrong, but if not, probably don't need that. But yeah, in general, I find, as I said, these things are very helpful, and I appreciate the effort that everyone's going to improve it. Thanks.
So to be clear for everyone too, I have all the notes from the first meeting. I typed them up. I shared them with Tyler and Melissa. I'm hoping what I was hoping today was to drill down even more. Like there's a question you're done with that, or if there's a question you definitely want to keep. So if you find that's the case, please email me so I don't get rid of something that you really wanted to see stay in there. And that's my fault for not communicating the difference in feedback that I was looking for, but pop me an email and I will hopefully work on this and have something for us to look at by our next meeting. And Mike, you didn't use the sheet, but if you have any comments, I'm more than happy to hear them.
I think Jenny's comment was, in looking at that, there needs to be some space for sort of nuance on some of these questions. And the point that she makes about an organization has to have the management capability to be able to handle the funds, and we have to have some way of assessing that.
Miriam, can I just say one word?
Yes, of course.
One of the things that I've kind of done it backwards, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I get to my part of the agenda. But I have really learned a lot about organizations after the fact. After we funded them, I've gone and done site visits. And it would have been helpful for me had I been able to do some part of that site visit before we made decisions about groups that were funded. I don't know, I'll make my own time. Okay. I can carve out whatever period, 2 o'clock in the morning, to talk to someone on the telephone or something like that, or whatever, or, go and do a site visit on Saturday or whatever, but certainly have some of that information before we have to make decisions.
I think that's a great point, Arthur, and I'm going to put it to the rest of the committee. What do you think? I mean, obviously, some of these projects or programs or organizations aren't conducive to site visit necessarily, but some of them are. And what does the committee think about incorporating a column for site visit input? Is it too much to ask? I realize I don't know.
I
I
mean,
have a full-time job, so
yeah.
I get there's some time pressure there too.
I'm a little reticent to agree to that without knowing what the time commitment would be or the total number, just because I don't want to bite off more than I could verbally chew. I guess things that I have seen, though, that are similar to what Arthur is talking about, but not directly analogous, are like interviews where people come in as a panel and we ask the same questions, or, or tell us more about yourself, kind of something like that. Maybe quick 5-10 minute interviews for a select group of folks that make a final cut of some type would be helpful. But that also might be helpful for site visits. Again, I also worry about site visits not being able to have a level playing field in terms of questions. There might be some unintended bias for organizations that have lots of bells and whistles, for instance, just as a random example. So I just want to make sure that we're comparing everybody the same way across the board.
But I also want to, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Arthur.
I also want to say that my category is a little different than some of the other groups that are filing for grants. The vulnerable population are different from, government programs. I think it's different if you're going to visit, let's say, the food pantry versus going to visit the library or going to visit DPW. Much smaller, can, get right to the point and actually see, rather than the DPW ordering a $2,000 or $200,000 tractor or whatever. So
Yep.
I'm going right to the person, A, B, C, D.
Yep. Jenny?
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit the last time, and I'm not comfortable that we all used different practices a little bit when we were reviewing the applications. We had, some people reviewed all the applications. Some people had like a different way of reviewing. We were not on the same page about that. And I really think that actually can lead to some unfortunate outcomes too. So I really prefer not to do that. I'm open to doing interviews despite my probably limited time, maybe like with a buddy, tag team it. But I guess it depends on what the application process is going to look like and what we're going to be asking people. Then we can maybe kind of circle back to this to see if it makes sense to have like maybe another layer of review or something like that. I'm just not sure right now. Whatever we do, I want it to be consistent, that everybody's following the same criteria and standards.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And we all need to be on the same page in terms of what we're scoring, how we're scoring it, and if we're allocating the whole amount or just the stuff in our cohort or what we're doing. So again, I'm fine as long as it's clearly spelled out in advance, because that way, I think that's the fairest way, I think.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we're fair.
Mike, anything to add?
No, I'm listening to this, to think about, I think interviews work very well with a tag team, 2 people.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is, and I can, Tyler, Melissa, Mike, and I can meet and work this out. But what I think might be a nice compromise is for us as the committee to incorporate interviews as, defining some criteria as to who would need to be called for an interview. So we're not interviewing 80 groups, right? But maybe at the end there, when we're trying to make our final decisions, bringing someone in. So creating some criteria for an interview, tag teaming the interview so we don't all have to do it all at once. Or potentially, if it's a small enough group of people, bringing them to a regular ARPA meeting for all of us to hear from them. And then, Tyler and I did talk about this before, so I'm not surprising him. I don't think this was, I think, percolating that site visits might become incorporated into, right now he's looking at me like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. That actually putting that on Tyler to do site visits, so that we're not doing it. And then you can, he can let you know, I'm going to go visit this. You can come, but he'll be one person consistently doing all the site visits, and we can help kind of create a criteria for him to be looking at with each site visit so that there's some consistency in that as well. How do we all think about that as a potential compromise? You could just speak up. Oh, thumbs up from Jenny. Yeah. Brian.
Yeah.
Yep.
Arthur.
I really think that I want to, touch base in some way, okay, to
So we would absolutely, you would interview them, and then Tyler would do the site visits. You could go with Tyler on the site visit, but I think if we have
good.
one.
Okay, fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Doing
That's
the
fine.
site visit, kind of reduce that ad hoc.
If I could go with, if Tyler and I can do it together, I think that, that is 100% absolutely the best way. Okay. And we can compare notes or whatever, and bring them back to the group together. That's fine. That's perfect. Okay. Perfect.
Right. That way that we have some consistency, because
Yeah.
Tyler will be the lead on all of them. And then not so much pressure on the rest of us who don't really have necessarily the flexibility in our schedule to add that to it.
And I also want to make sure that we're building out that criteria too, just for the ones that have already been awarded to, not as even as like an evaluation and selection criteria, but also as an oversight metric, because that's one of those best practices that I've started to see come up a lot in some of these ARPA peer groups, where folks are starting to encourage that as well. So
That's great. And Tyler, if you find out if any of them have already existing criteria we could use to start our discussion, that'd be great.
I'll reach out. I have a peer group with other ARPA admins around Mass, so I can see what they have.
Great. Thank you. So I think we have a good plan forward. The smaller group will work on revising the process and the sheet. And at our next meeting, hopefully we'll have something for everyone to look at and give input on and potentially vote on for our phase 2 decision making. In terms of communication strategy, announcements and communication strategy, one of the big things we're doing is we're going to set our timeline soon and make that public and really try to get it out there, so nobody's surprised when the grant opens and when it closes. So people have time to prepare for their grant submission, to get support and help for their grant submission, and that we have a set deadline so that we can start our review process of the grants. And I think that's everything. I think that's everything on the agenda, except for the issue that Arthur, we're going to talk a lot more about. Oh yeah, Brian, go ahead.
Thanks. Just one final thing on sort of process. I guess I'd like to request that any town applications in phase 2 be a lot more streamlined. I know at the end, the former town manager went through everything, town administrator, excuse me, went through everything and kind of triaged. But I think we just need to clarify that process and make sure that either Chaz or the select board is comfortable with the ones that do go in and will almost certify-ish that it's a real need as opposed to a want.
I have to say, I think this is a great point, and it's maybe something that Chaz and Melissa want to talk about, whether an application for the ARPA from the town needs to be signed off on by either Chaz or Melissa. It's a good idea. Chaz, Melissa, you want to add anything?
I think we'd be prepared to make recommendations on the submissions that are coming from the town side for sure.
Yeah. I would, that those certainly, yeah.
I wouldn't want to gatekeep necessarily. I want to make sure that they have their opportunities, but we can provide recommendations based on that.
Yeah, I guess it's not necessarily gatekeeping, Chaz. It's more just, these are supposed to meet a certain level of criteria. I just need assurances that it's actually true, which is not to say the department heads aren't being honest, but they have a bit of a vested interest in getting what they need for what they feel they need for their people. And there needs to be kind of a neutral arbiter at the end that says, no, this is a real need and it has our imprimatur.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would add to that, and Jenny, I see your hand, but I'm going to add to that. One of the issues was we said over and over again, we really don't want to fund positions that are going to add to the operating budget. And we still got quite a few requests for positions that add. So maybe again, I understand you don't want to do gatekeeping, but if there's something that's going to be adding to the operating budget at the end of the grant, that might be an opportunity for you to say, that's not an ARPA appropriate request. But I'm going to leave that up to you to decide how you want to handle that. And then I'm going to get Jenny's input.
Just to say that I definitely don't, we're using the same phrase of gatekeeping, but it's your recommendation will be helpful for us to understand what the real priorities are. And then within each department, we also want to better understand what are the real priorities so that it helps us in the decision making. There's this wish list and there's like things that are desirable, but then there's things that make sense or that are actually achievable in the timeline. And I think that that's the kind of thing that at least I would be looking for, is that's what's built into this recommendation, is some sense of those priorities from the town level.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think on our end, what we'll probably do is we will put a set of guidelines together for department heads so they know in advance what it is that the committee is looking for, and to have that understanding right off the bat. Because I agree, we've already spoken. This is the start of my second week. We've already spoken as a team about how the use of ARPA for operational expenses, operational and overhead, not what we're doing. So
great. That was great. Thank you for bringing that up. All right. Take a look at the agenda. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I'm just laughing at that. Thinking, I wonder if we could talk to the school superintendent about this.
We had that conversation too.
Good. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. So to recap, we are going to revise the process, and we'll get something for everyone to look at by our next meeting. And we are going to also settle on the timeline for phase 2, and we will share that as publicly and widely as possible. Anything else before we move on to what was item number 3 on the agenda, which will now be item number 5? All right, so what I'm going to do is give you just a little background, which is Arthur did some site visits for some of the grants that we had funded that he had reviewed, and brought up a lot of, I think, really important issues that he wanted to bring to us for discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Arthur and let him talk about what I would appreciate, Arthur, is we don't want to call out individual organizations.
No.
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll talk about generalities and how to address these issues. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, Melissa, can you put your number, just email me your telephone number so that I call you right after the meeting adjourns, okay? So I can talk to you for 5 minutes. It's very, very important.
No problem.
All right. Thank
Yep.
you. Okay.
Yep.
Second, I also, I sincerely want to thank the group, the panel. This is my mission in life. Just exactly what I'm doing now is what I should be doing at this point in my life. All right. Janetta Cole, the former president of Spelman College, said, on your way up, pull somebody with you. Okay. That's my mission. Pull the vulnerable population, okay, as many as I can, get them across this river. And I think this is one of the ways that it can happen. But let me just read my statement. It'll take two minutes, actually a little longer. But hear me out, please. The year leading up to his assassination, Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King's greatest focus was on poverty and economic injustice. He believed desegregation and the right to vote were critical factors for Black and other economically deprived people of color groups in America. But Dr. King also believed this underclass would never reach full citizenship until they reached economic security. Through nonviolent direct action, he hoped to focus the nation's attention on economic inequality, poverty, and injustice. November of 1967, Dr. King planted a seed with his Southern Christian leadership staff to organize a Poor People's March to Washington, D.C. The march was called a new stage of massive, active, nonviolent resistance to the evils of modern corporate society, unquote. His idea was to bring a nonviolent army of 3,000 mendicants to the nation's capital to demand, quote, a critical distribution of economic power. 4 months later, J. Edgar Hoover circulated an internal memo to his bureau stressing the need for a COINTELPRO program and specifically ordered his agents to prevent the rise of a messiah, especially naming Dr. King. March of '68, Native, Mexican, Latino, and poor white American leaders from 17 states traveled to Atlanta for a planning meeting of the Poor People's Campaign. And in the months leading up to his assassination, Dr. King made some of his most searing proclamations against white supremacy, the Vietnam War, and US imperialism. But more than any other time in his life, Dr. King's final focus was on poverty and economic injustice. He said, and I quote, "We must recognize that we can't solve our problem now until there is a radical redistribution of economic and political power. America is deeply racist and its democracy is flawed, both economically and socially. The Black Revolution is much more than a struggle for the rights of Negroes. It is forcing America to face all of its interrelated flaws: racism, poverty, militarism, and materialism. It is exposing evils that are deeply rooted in the whole structure of our society. It reveals systematic rather than superficial flaws and suggests that radical reconstruction of society itself is the real issue to be faced. Hence, his assassination on the 4th of April, 1968, and the eventual collapse and dismantling of his Poor People's Campaign. Fast forward to the headlines in the Associated Press earlier this week. Quote, federal authorities charged 47 people in Minnesota with the conspiracy and other counts in what they said Tuesday was the largest fraud scheme yet to take advantage of COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic, by stealing $250 million from a federal program that provides meals to low-income children, unquote. This is only one state, one program. The Black, Brown, Red exploitation complex, quiet as it's kept, is near the top as one of the largest financial rackets on the planet. Brookline must not be included as part of it. we have an opportunity, okay, to make systematic changes in how the underclass in this community gets a chance to live as decent human beings. And we must put our efforts, okay, as best we can to make that happen. What now?
Arthur,
Yes,
we have about 8 to 10 minutes
you
before.
got,
I
okay,
take
you
public
heard
comment.
what, you
So
heard, you heard.
what I want to talk about is the meat of it. What do we do?
I think that, I think, and I don't want to put names out there, I think that we need to straighten up and clean up some of the mistakes that we have made. I'm not saying that they are made, but how do we improve and make our underclass that are part of this first stage to really take advantage of what, okay, we're offering? I've seen the flaws, and I think we need to just change some things.
So tell me, because for me, what I need, first of all, I've chatted with you, and if in 30 seconds or less, you can tell us some of the things that you saw that are concerning. But what would really be helpful is the steps that we should be taking, or at least putting out there the concerning steps so we as a committee can discuss how we think we should address it.
Okay, I'll just give you one, I took a site visit to the food pantry. Okay, I went to, is it okay to say that?
Too late, go ahead.
I said, see, well, that's what I'm saying. Okay, but
Okay.
okay, but I'm just going to use that one example. I took a site visit to the 3 of their programs. Okay, I never saw, and I did an hour at each one. I never saw a Black person at any of those sites that I visited. And I'm not charging them with any misdeeds, okay? Or how do we get to the Black community?
We're not
to
reaching
make,
the right people.
absolutely, okay? That's just one small thing. And what do we do to make that happen? There are a couple of others, okay? I've visited seven sites, okay? What do we do to make that happen?
One of the things, and I'm open to everybody's input, but one of the things that I think of when I hear that is that maybe if we're giving funds to organizations that are intending to reach out to particular populations, we ask in advance for some plan from them on how they intend to reach those populations.
Right, but we didn't
do that, but we can do that.
Absolutely. Okay,
That's
so
what I'm saying. Yeah, we can
okay.
add that as a
That's-
requirement to their funding. But I want to see what Mike and Tyler have their hands up. So let's see what you guys. And I will look for other suggestions. That's just something that came to mind. Go ahead, Mike.
2 things. One is to the I was going to say to the extent possible, but it's certainly possible. Arthur, if you or anybody can identify, you have to reach to an organization, whether the organization is a group of tenants in the housing authority or a group of people who are meeting around a school issue or something like that. You have to if we can reach out to specific groups or then and sort of and make them aware of what's being done with the money and where they could tap into it. That's one thing. And the other is, I don't know the extent to which the Community Foundation, for example, was able to help organizations put proposals together. But that's something that I know they do that with their own grant applicants. They have a workshop or something like that on how to put a proposal together. But one of the hurdles, we have how do you get government money? Well, you have to apply for it, and the process for applying for it can really be daunting to somebody who doesn't understand the ropes. And to the extent that we can reach through that red tape and get either help somebody directly or get some help for them. I think that would help. There's a I agree. I think this is, I don't know if you're old enough as I am to remember the saying from Mao Zedong, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. In America, it grows out of a checkbook. And you're
Oh,
absolutely,
the dollar bill.
you're absolutely right. Economics underlies political power. So you're therefore absolutely right about what we should be trying to do with these funds. So let's.
So Mike, what I'm hearing from you is potentially working with the BCF to see if we can sponsor some ARPA specific workshops.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to
And
pick
I'm
that
gonna
up.
let-
There's a new director at BCF. She actually she comes from an organization. Well, they had a little different focus, but they should have the resources.
We could talk a little bit offline because workshops like that, we would definitely want them to go to the housing authority, to go into the community. We could talk about that offline because I'm just being mindful of the time. And Tyler, thank you. It's a great suggestion. Tyler, you have your hand up. You're next, and then Chaz.
I want to reiterate that idea to start looking at that as a strategy with the evaluation, kind of coming back to how we're going to look at the second round. Because outright, the Treasury is asking those questions on the reporting for the ones we've actually awarded. They ask outright there, who was served? How did you identify those?
See that?
Reach out to them. The Treasury is already telling that. So that, we have to make sure we're covering that just even on the reporting side. So we need that up front anyway. And a lot of people did a good job giving us that information, but we just need to ask that outright, almost as if that's like a new thing we include in the application to say, how are you doing this? What is your strategy? If you fall into
it, let's include it in the application.
But one thing, I'm sorry, but I don't think that we should go through this first round without trying to make because they haven't actually gotten the money. We need to start tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, I've made the 7 site visits. I know I have a few more. I'll come back to you. Okay. But let's make this first round. Okay.
And then I'm going to call on Chaz, and then I'm going to make sure we get time for public comment. Go ahead, Chaz.
Yeah, I don't want to take up public comment time. Just very briefly to build off what Tyler was saying. I agree with you, Arthur, that the process, you can build processes in place now in the first round to make this more equitable and benefit the communities that it's intended to benefit. That's also a part of the reporting process, so that's good. The other thing you could do is that in your second round, you could put your finger on the scale in terms of weighting the metrics that you view as valuable for projects. Right now, in the current version of the form, you have them all. You ask the question: is it going to serve a qualified census tract? Is it going to primarily serve a community that's 50? Is the purpose to serve 50% or more of a BIPOC community? You can afford more weight to those. So if in the next round, if you re-weight your application evaluation process, you can then by definition, you're going to come up with more highly rated projects that serve the goals of the community.
Great. Thank you, Chaz. That's a great idea. Jenny?
I agree with all these suggestions, first of all, but I also want to I really hear this as really an important issue. So I think we need to be very thoughtful about it. I also think that it might make sense to consider maybe a small amount, taking out a small amount from the pot that we're going to be considering and making it available on a rolling basis, because I'm concerned now that I'm hearing this, that the 6-week application period actually might not be enough time, or that we're asking for too much from applicants. So maybe we also need to consider sort of different ways of approaching the application process a little bit to reduce some of the, eliminate kind of the barriers. And then I'm thinking that we really need to communicate this priority a little bit better in our process. I definitely agree with that. The last thing would be maybe some technical assistance, like language assistance. I don't know, like we could offer a webinar and making sure people understand how to fill out the application, maybe a couple of them, or just a recording of one so that it's available, once we post the application, and maybe do that in different languages. And then we mentioned the BCF, but I wonder about other intermediaries as being another way of reaching out. So those are just some immediate thoughts that come to mind.
Those are great. Thank you.
I do think you have to get closer to people than a webinar.
Yeah.
You really have, you almost have to sit down with
Definitely.
somebody side by side. And that's where an intermediary, an organization that has some volunteers, board members and so forth, like the Community Foundation. And you're right there. I'm sure there are other, in fact, the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization has a strong presence in Brookline. That's another place.
Yep.
And that is, at least broadly speaking, plugged into minority communities.
Yeah, my bigger thing there was technical assistance, but a webinar would also be helpful as part of the process.
Oh, yeah, having something
Both
up so that
and.
people can use it. Yeah.
Yeah. Both and. I think that's the.
Yeah.
So what I would say is to those listening in the public, if you have ideas you'd like to share with us on this, please email arpareview@brooklinemass.gov. And that email address is on our website also. So we'd like to hear from everybody, but I have listed 8 to 9 interventions here that we'll start working on integrating and addressing both for this process and for the one going forward. And on that note, I am going to, because we have 7 minutes left, open us up for public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. And we're going to limit you, just like the select board public comment, except I'm going to make it even shorter because we only have 6 minutes now, 2 minutes for comment, but you can also email us at any time. Do we have anybody? We have 2 folks who looks like want to make a comment. Deborah and Alec. Can we promote them, Tyler? And we'll start with Deborah. Deborah, 2 minutes, please, and I'll give you a 30-second warning.
Alrighty, let me pull my notes out.
All right.
I know.
I won't
First
start
of all-
until you start talking.
Okay. BCF actually had sessions. I took advantage of them. They had an overview session, they had a collaborative session, and they were willing to meet one-on-one with anybody that did it. I actually sent my proposals to them before submitting them. I agree with Arthur around greater diversity participation. Something I haven't heard anybody mention that is going to come up in the reviews, and that is the level of minority business participation. I mean, I think that in the body of those contracts, there ought to be some specific goals, and they should be significant. We need to be making sure that, to the extent that we're doling out money, that there's a prevailing wage component to it. I agree with doing audits. I think that an audit doesn't have to be a negative or burdensome, but just having someone come out and give people feedback before it's way too late in the process might be a beneficial activity. But just to conclude, there has been technical assistance, and I don't know how you get to people, but I'm happy to help.
Thank you. And you still have 30 seconds. Thanks, Deborah.
Okay, all right, then I'll say one last thing. These boards need to, no, seriously, somebody needs to figure out how to diversify boards. If we're talking about programs that benefit disadvantaged people, then maybe a third of those boards should have disadvantaged people on them. People with lived experience.
Yeah.
So that's my last.
Remind me to send you, last year at our annual convening for my job, we did an entire panel on that very topic. I'll send it to you.
Did you,
Go ahead. Yeah.
did you film it? Was it,
Yes,
was it?
it's recorded. I'll send it to everybody.
Absolutely. Good. Thank you. That's great.
All right. Alec, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. Thank you all members of the panel. I'll try and keep it very brief here. I just also wanted to strongly echo my support for Arthur's point that he made earlier. And thank you all for taking it seriously, and sounds like operationalizing ways that we can incorporate that focus on equity more into round 2. So I think that's wonderful. Also, definitely support all the points that Deborah Brown made. I think that was really well put. I did want to maybe bring up 2 specific things in this area. One being, I think the need at BHA is very high right now. Talking with BHA residents, some of my fellow town meeting members in particular, I've heard some pretty shocking things about some of the maintenance backlogs in the BHA system. So if we are looking for projects that can have a real, impact on people's day-to-day lives, and also target a population that we know is overdue for investments to bring them up to equity par with other residents, I think that's definitely a good place to start or consider starting. And the second point I wanted to bring up is in round 1, one of the, I think, wise investments that this panel led and we've now made as a town is in the conducting of a community health needs assessment, which I'm now hopeful that in round 2, we might put some money aside for a corresponding community health improvement plan that might be developed after the needs assessment comes back. These needs assessments typically will act as a roadmap in laying out where some of the disparate need is in our community.
You have 30 seconds.
Okay, differing health challenges that are faced by vulnerable populations and marginalized residents. So I hope that we can put some funding behind the findings of that assessment and target some of the inequities in health, which I think are some of the more shocking ones in the greater Boston area, at least by social economic status and race. So those were just my 2 points, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Alec. And I will say to that, that Sigal had just been brought on during the ARPA process. And so we do expect to see a more robust request from public health this time around that they really didn't have the opportunity to present the first time because of the change in leadership there. Thank you. Ade, thank you for joining us. You have 2 minutes and I will give you a 30-second warning.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. And I want to say thank you to the committee for letting me speak. Reiterating Arthur's and Deborah and Alex's point, it is very, very imperative that this time vulnerable populations don't get skipped. And I'm speaking as somebody that is active within the community. Some of you guys know my work. But in terms of Black and Brown and how to reach the community, I would suggest we are some of the people to deal with. Black and Brown Club, we have over 150 members. We are in every last one of these low income housing, from Egmont to High Street to over the hill. So we're a good way to get in touch with the community. We have a bit. 100% of our group or our organizations are low income people from this community. We know what we want. And if you guys should decide to use our way or our resources, we're good people, talk to us. We live in this community. We have people in Egmont and High Street that they actually live there, lifelong residents or people that have lived there for decades, that if you guys want to get a beat of exactly how they feel from Black and Brown view, feel free to reach out to Black and Brown Club. We're here to help. So we're direct source to that community. And one more point real quick.
30 seconds.
Yes, sir. Well, yes, ma'am. Well, Mike Sandman, giving grants to other organizations sometimes can be a problem for some small organization within the community, within Black and Brown community, because they put red tapes around their own rules, right? And it's harder to get past that. So I think phase 2, let's just talk to people. We need to get out there. I can help some of you guys, but let's talk to the community more. Talk to us more in this case. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the people who gave us public input and stayed on time. I appreciate that. We are at 3:01, and as I said at the beginning, I had a hard stop at 3.
Move to adjourn.
So I'll try to type up all my notes, and we'll get another meeting on the calendar. And it's good to get us all back together again. I love this work. I'm really proud of what we did in phase one. I think we can be really proud in phase one and still know we have improvements to make as we go through the process. And for phase two, those two things can be held together. And I hope we do that. So thank you, everybody. And see you next time.
Melissa, I'm going to call you right now.
All right, bye, everyone. Have a good
Bye.
weekend.